So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I put this little PowerPoint together, so it's the best that it can be with my little laptop. If you can't see it, then either you can reposition yourself or just enjoy the talk. Can anyone see that, by the way? Is that viewable by anyone over here? Okay. Any of you guys want to go on that side? Maybe the sun's getting in the way.
You guys should go a little bit.
Here, I kind of pointed that way. Yes. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Is it okay? Okay. Cool. So I'm Ronnie Landis, as I introduced myself. As a little side on me is that the way I got into this whole thing was through a few different channels. I've been involved in nutrition and peak performance, really peak performance, probably the last 15 years of my life. I've been a lifelong athlete for the last 22 years. Since I was about 4 years old, I was introduced to martial arts through one of my heroes, Bruce Lee. From the first time I saw him on the screen, and the Ninja Turtles. I was like, yeah, I saw that. I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I got into martial arts, and from a very young age, I was so influenced by the lifestyle of it. I think from a very young age, I had a spiritual, I had some kind of connection early on that I just understood. It wasn't from my mom or my parents or anyone. It was just something that I had inside of me, and I identified it with that way of life. So I've been walking that path for my entire life, really. And the last 10 years, I was an aspiring Olympic hopeful for Taekwondo, and then after that, I actually was a semi-professional basketball player. And right now, if I didn't decide to do what I'm doing right now, there's no doubt in my mind that I would probably be playing, if not in the NBA, in the pre-leagues. I was literally a week away from the semi-professional tryouts when I had this, I was cleansing. This was right before I got into raw foods, hardcore, and I started cleansing, and then I had a whole opening up. I had a whole spiritual experience, and I had some vision that came to me that told me, you need to change lanes. You've been doing this your whole life, and you are no longer the same person you used to be. So you're going to have to get out of that model, and you're going to have to enter this new world. I didn't know I was going to be a speaker, and I was going to be this voice for raw food nutrition, superfood nutrition, herbalism, chocolate, every major health technology that we have available to us right here, right now. I had no idea that was going to be my destiny. Now there's no confusion. I know that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Therefore, I'm doing it. But at the time, I was just I told my coach, I was like, listen, coach, I don't really know what's going on, but I know we've been working on this three times a day for the last year, but I can't do it. I have to change my course. From there on, I got super deep into raw food nutrition. I've been into nutrition for a while previous to that, but unbeknownst to me, I didn't really know about raw food nutrition. I had no idea there was this whole raw food culture that was taking over the country and over the world. Really, I had no idea what a vegetable was. Really, I barely ate that stuff. I was into the whey proteins and all the goobity gobbity nonsense that is being sold to us and packaged as health products, right? That's what I was into. So I was really into peak performance from an athletic standpoint. That's what got me into nutrition. I had 2 major knee surgeries from the time I was 19. I'm 26 now, about to be 27 in May. I had a major knee surgery from Taekwondo on my right knee. I tore my meniscus, and I spent years trying to rehab it, working with all the top physicians and trainers, and pouring all my money into it, all my time and energy into it. And then years later during basketball, I tore my ACL and tore a part of my cartilage on my left knee. And so by that time, about 7 years, I was basically going through this path of trying to heal myself. And then finally I was led on to who is now a friend of mine and my personal mentor, David Wolf. And I saw a video on getting barefoot, actually. It had nothing to do with raw food. I was just like, oh, that's okay, that sounds interesting. I got this book called Born to Run, which is all about some of the greatest runners that the world has ever seen, or the world has never seen, I should say. And these guys were practically barefoot runners. You know, a basketball player, you're wearing all these like highly insulated shoes and running and all that kind of stuff. So I found out that was actually a big contributor to my problem. And then from there, I was like, well, I didn't know about raw food, but I knew this guy's speaking the message. If you ever seen David Wolf speak, you know. I was like, okay, I need to see another video. I need to see something else. And then finally, I was like, whoa. It was like this video called Visions of Paradise, if you guys know that video. It just blew my mind.
What's that?
It blew my heart open, actually. It really showed me. I was like, whoa, this is something I want to really get into. So that's how I got into raw food nutrition. Now, the major impact it had on me physically was that I spent 7 years trying to heal myself, and about, I'd say, if I remember correctly, this was years ago, but I'd say at least like something like 2 months, I completely healed my knees. Like, completely healed my knees. I got on the raw foods, I got on the grounding, I got barefoot, got into nature, and literally in 2 months, I did like some 5-mile run barefoot in the hills. I got back to my car and I remember thinking, yeah.
I'm sorry. Are you saying you healed your knees without surgery?
I had 2 surgeries.
Correct.
I had 2 surgeries, but I had to rehab years later.
Got it.
So I had the surgeries because I didn't know any of this stuff.
Right.
Right. So I ended up just healing it through, the rehab wasn't working the way it could have been working because I was constantly inflaming myself through the food that I was eating. So I was doing good, but then I was counterbalancing it. It's like opposing forces. That's why I was never getting the results I wanted. It was through these alternative lifestyle choices that I found the missing link. I remember going to my car after that run, and I hadn't run for years. And I don't know what it was. I just started running. 5 miles later, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not in pain. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I'm not in pain. I just ran 5 miles, and I feel nothing. And that's what really, I was like, whoa, we got to get into this. So since then to now, I've literally committed 100% of my energy to diving into the deep mystery of nutrition. I'm so fascinated by nutrition. To me, it's like, I feel like looking at the world at large, every single major problem that's going on in the world can be aided, if not completely wrapped around through raw food nutrition and the principles that go along with it. Because it's not just about the nutrition. Once you start to heal yourself physically, you can start allowing your real self to come out. Like Dan was talking about, it's really like it's a spiritual experience. Because we're not here to talk about like white meat is better than red meat, right? That's not the conversation we're here to have. Okay, if you want that conversation, you can go on, the nightly news and you might get that. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about massive life transformation on every single level you can think of. So that's why I'm here today, and that's actually why I've decided to completely dedicate myself at the highest levels of bringing this message out to people, because this is what the world needs.
Good. Right?
Oh yeah, right on. Let's give him a big hand, by the way. Dan's the man.
This will cost you about $8 anywhere else.
Serving up the juice of life right here.
I'll get another one. No, this one is not spicy. The next one is spicy. How do you
check yourself out?
Beautiful, you got it. Nice work. Nice
so,
shot.
And by the way, if you want like the quickest, simplest thing to do, vegetable juice. I got something for you. It's super simple. Apple, ginger, celery. Apple, ginger, celery. Hit that button as much as you want, and you will be uplifted and revitalized on the deepest levels. You can take my word for that one. Okay, so let's get into this. Enough about me. Let's get into the message here. Why not to cook our food? This is an interesting question. It's not really, there are people out there that are pushing the button in my opinion, with the wrong energy, saying that all cooked food's bad, you can't have this, you can't have that. You got to be or like what was in the diet world, it's like you got to be carnivore, you got to be vegetarian, you got to be vegan, you got to be raw foodist, you got to be frugivore, insectivore, whatever. That's not what I'm here to talk about either. What I want to do is bring some ideas to the table. And the beautiful thing about having a clear table that doesn't have any presuppositions on it, that's not cluttered, is that when you have a clear table and you put a few things on there, you can decide, okay, this looks good, I want that. This looks good, I want that. It's all about trying different things and finding out what actually resonates with you, and then going with that. So for me, this question actually started, it's actually kind of weird how I started coming to this question, like, why do we actually cook our food? Has anyone seen the movie Lord of the Rings? Everyone's seen? Okay, now, if you can remember this scene, it's really weird how I came to this whole thing, but I remember Gandalf sitting on the hill, like the first half of the movie, and he takes this pipe and he gets this whatever plant that was out and puts in this pipe and starts lighting up the plant, right? Whatever that is. And starts smoking it. And right there I was like, why do people smoke weeds? What gave someone the idea to get some kind of pipe, to get some plant, random plant, put it in a pipe and light it and smoke it and just everything that comes with it? That's how I came to this question. Why do we cook our food? How did we get to that place where we're like, okay, well, we're just going to start cooking our food and eating it? Man, that question right there led me on a whole rigmarole of a whole bunch of synchronicities that's led to here. So, right here, if you guys can see this image, most of the people here are aware of Kirlian photography, right? Yep. Now, so if you can see this to me, this is it. Like, I'm going to get into some stuff that you've probably never heard. Even if you've been into raw foods, you might never have heard the stuff that I'm going to get into. But this right here, I mean, this is the most commonsensical thing ever. This is a cooked piece of cabbage. This is a live piece of cabbage. One is emitting life force energy, the other isn't. Who needs a little more life force in their body? Who feels like they could use a little more life in their life? Right? Because the whole diet industry, the whole anything with the word die cannot produce life. Right? What's the nature of fire? Is the nature of fire to produce seeds, to produce life, or is it to degrade life? Play with that on your, use your own intuition on that one. If you're not aware with it, thank you so much.
Cheers.
Sorry. Listen, I just want to interrupt a minute and thank Dan for this. This is really, really good.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Excellent. He's got the entire farmer's market in here.
That is beautiful.
He does. The entire farmer's market is like in this.
So, Kirlian photography. See, this is what I find so interesting about this one piece right here, is that in the 1960s, a biochemist named Fritz Albert Poff found out that within the cellular structure of every living being, from a plant to an animal to a person, there is this light emission that radiates out of it, that emits out of our cellular structure. And that's called biophotons, the prana, or what we know in the raw food community as life force, right? There's something that happens when you ingest raw organic with the emphasis on raw and organic go together. When you ingest these foods, there's something that happens to your physiology. There's something that happens to your psychology. The thoughts that I used to think on hamburgers, fries, basically the muscle seed and Coca-Cola diet that I was on, the thoughts I'm thinking now are way different than the thoughts I used to think. I mean, I used to be so concerned with like, okay, I got to go to the mall, I got to look good, I got to get the right shoes, I got to get the right fit, I got to, Friday night, that's when we're going out and we're doing our thing, we're going to go, chase girls, whatever we were doing back then. Now it's like, Friday night, I'm in the books, I'm doing events, I'm getting with conscious people. It's a whole different story than it used to be. And I know that influence by what I ingest has a deep influence on the thoughts I think about. Who here's heard You are what you think about. Right? The strangest secret? Everyone knows what the strangest secret is, right?
Oh, yeah.
Still a damn secret to most people. That was Earl Nightingale. Thoughts are things. Right? In the 1950s, this guy was the guy who basically launched the audio tape, like audio vehicle university, where you could drive in your car and listen to some personal development, like Tony Robbins now that we got, or Bob Proctor, or Jim Rohn, or any of these great orators that have like tremendously affected my life. That was the guy that launched that whole thing. His whole thing was, you are what you think about, which is true. You are what you think about. But there's a major piece that's missing. There's two pieces, but we'll just get into one of them. You are what you eat. That was the piece that was missing in his life, and he ended up dying of severe heart condition. Because he was under the assumption that I could think my way to heaven, but I could still be eating steak and potatoes and doing that whole thing. There's a lot of people like that too in that world. And I'm starting to meet some of those people the more I get out there. I'm actually meeting these people that I, grew up listening to, and I'm finding out, whoa, it's a different story than what's on the stage, right? So we have to bring these principles together. It's not just one thing, right? It's not just bananas, There's other things to it, right? Okay, anyways, so the reason I'm a raw foodist today, and the reason I've chosen, or maybe the reason I was chosen, however you want to look at it, is I've tried to go the other way. Whenever I eat cooked food now, it doesn't work. Like, I'm not one of those people that gets on an idea and just kind of like super dogmatic and just, I can't see anything else. I've literally tried to have like vegetarian burrito at work and stuff, and I can't do any of it. I've tried to work around it. It just affects me differently. That's my own experience. So I know for me, this is my path. Part of my mission on this earth is raw, living plant food. That's how it works for me. And this right here, what else do you really need? Do I even need to go on with this presentation? If you want more life force, there it is, right there. You don't need to cook lettuce. You don't need to cook broccoli. You don't need, there's some things that help. And any questions, by the way? I'm just going to keep going with the flow. If you guys have any questions, keep it on the forefront of your consciousness, and then we'll get into that after, just to keep the flow going, okay? Because I really do want to be as, I want to try to avoid going off too much, so I'm about to just try to get real direct with the presentation. Okay, so anyways, for me, it's like I want more life force in my life. I know what the other program's like. I don't need someone to explain it to me scientifically, although I am actually more into the science now than I used to be. I find it very fascinating because all the metaphysical ideas, all the esoteric ideas are meeting up with the science. Actually now, because everyone science. It's all about science, even though science is, the way we look at science is actually the most, I would say, the most, what's the word? In high school it's called a junior. Okay, it's the most junior or juvenile, I would say, form of science that we have. It's the youngest form of science. But although, regardless, it's still meeting up with all these esoteric ideas. All the stuff in the biblical times, the Essene Gospel of Peace. I read that book, right? It says it right there. So, it's very, it's just very common sense based. Okay, moving on. So, now this whole thing on cooking our food, this quote that I got from this book called The Origins of Human Diet and Medicine. This is a very interesting book to read. And the quote says, "The primary contribution of cooking may have been in controlling the microbiological toxins associated with the increased use of meat." So how did we get on this whole thing on cooking? Well, the most obvious thing was it was a preservation agent for our food, right? We didn't have Whole Foods or Safeway or Unsafeway, however you look at it, or Unlucky's, or any of these different grocery stores that we all take for granted. We live in the most opulent abundance imaginable right here, right now. We live in the FedEx era. Just imagine the most sacred food ever to the entire Mesoamerican culture. We can order, cacao, it's cool. Yeah, we can order pounds of it. Literally, I have pounds of it sitting in my house. Oh, it's cool, no big deal, right? That's the world we live in. We take for granted every single thing we have. But back in those days, it was a different story. So so obviously, to me, it was a preservation agent first. It wasn't about health. There was no nutrition classes going on back then, right? And the meat consumption that we have now compared to the last, let's say, 100 years is at least 10 times. I mean, back in the day, like, you know, I'm in the diet world. You know, I hear from like the paleo people and the whatever, you know, carnivore theorists and all them. They're like, oh, no, we've been eating tons of meat for hundreds of years. Really? Is that a fact, or is that an assumption that we made? Because I know for a fact that 100 years ago, people ate what they needed to eat. The Native Americans ate what they needed to eat to survive and to move through, right? Now it's like we're guzzling down 4, 5, 6, 7 cows a day, right? But we make up these excuses. We fool ourselves basically into assuming, oh yeah, people just adapted through cooking. We just adapted to eating meat, right? Have we really adapted, or have we just kind of fooled ourselves? And I'm not claiming to know the answer. I don't know. I just know that I've done one program for 25 years, and then I've moved on to the other one, and I've experienced radical transformation on every single level of my life. And I know, hey, I like the direction of this, so I'm going to go with this. And so I'll leave it to your own intuition as to, you know, if these questions mean anything to you. Maybe they don't. As to why we started cooking, what was cooking for, the use of fire. I want to touch on this point before I move on. If you really look at the nature of fire, you have to really look at this, like, objectively. What does fire do? What is the nature of fire? Like I said before, it destroys things, right? It's not that fire is evil. Fire is very useful. Obviously, people would use fire to create a pathway out of darkness, right? When they didn't have lights. Or they would use it in celebrations. They'd create a big bonfire and they'd dance and do their whole thing. Tribes would get around the fire and they would celebrate. So it's very useful, but in terms of preparing food, me personally, I don't really see it in our world now. Maybe back hundreds of years ago, yeah, it made total sense. But now, 2012, where we have every single thing we want at our fingertips like that, it's not really necessary. Just like eating meat, in my opinion, is not really necessary. To me, it's like, what's necessary? Right? It's not so much like, okay, I want this or I need this to be healthy. It's like, well, what's actually necessary for me to achieve my goals? So that's my thing on cooking. Okay, so this is something I want to get into a little more detail, but I'm going to attempt to move through it as best I can. Now, like I said, I am so deeply involved in the study of nutrition that I'm like, if you saw me outside of here, you'd be like, whoa, that dude is like, he's on it, or he might be, or he's like really crazy. Because like I'm like going on Amazon. Since we do have everything at our fingertips, why not get it? I'm getting every single Gabriel Cousins book. I got every single David Wolf book. Every single Brian Clement book. I got it all. That's where I put my money, because I believe wherever you're putting your money, you're investing into something. You're investing into the world that you predict is going to happen. I predict we're going to have paradise. So I'm reading books on paradise. How do we create paradise inside first, and then go out in the world and then express that out? So I'm on everything. Staying up all night long. That's why I have little black circles, you may have noticed, because right now I'm so young where I know I got all this energy. I'm going to use it, right? Bruce Lee was my mentor. Keep that in mind. I learned a lot from that guy. I'm going to use my energy so I can be a force in the world eventually. Anyways, so the effects of cooking on health. Let's look at enzymes. And that's the big thing in the raw food world, is enzymes. By the way, after studying like the conventional side of nutrition for so many years and then studying raw food nutrition, I realized that the biggest distinction in nutrition is going to be raw food, cooked food. That's the biggest distinction, because if you read all these books, like the Dr. Atkins book, you read all these books, it makes sense. The premise of that idea makes sense. Okay, we've been overloading ourselves on all kinds of crazy carbohydrates, right? We've just been like blowing ourselves on that, so it makes sense to add in, okay, we need to get proteins and we need to get quality fat into our diet in order to recalibrate ourselves. But the premise makes sense, but the application is totally ridiculous, right? His solution to that was like, you know, like steak and he pushed that message, and you saw what happened to him, right? The heart disease doctor dies of a
Heart attack.
Heart attack, right? So it's kind of like just looking at what's obvious. Anyways, the whole enzyme thing is really interesting to me because this is so deep. As you study enzymes, you start to realize, whoa, there's way more going on with this than we were actually told before. According to Dr. Edward Howells, this guy had 70 years of research on enzymatic capabilities. And there's two main distinctions of enzymes. There's metabolic enzymes, and there's digestive enzymes, food enzymes. Now, in the raw food community, we're all taught about food enzymes. That's the main thing, right? Raw food. It still has its enzymes intact. And this is super critical to understand. But there's also another story, which is the metabolic enzymes. This is our life enzymes. So when we're born, we have a certain enzymatic bank account, right? And every single function, every single biological function, every single metabolic function in our body requires enzymes in order to activate. So when people get to about 60, 70, 80 years old, and they're depleted practically of their enzymes, what happens? We start to see osteoporosis, we start to see Alzheimer's, right? All these different conditions, is that normal? Is that like a normal factor of nature? I don't think so. Anyways, so the main thing with raw foods is that we can repopulate ourselves with enzymes because, let's get real, every one of us is coming from a really crazy, bizarre situation, right? It's a really bizarre world we live in. The stuff that we've been ingesting since day one, especially if you weren't breastfed by your mother, who knows what your mother was consuming when you were breastfed. We populate ourselves with, you know, the most junk food imaginable. So we've depleted a lot of that enzymatic capacity that we have inside of us. Now we have the knowledge to know that we can repopulate ourselves with these valuable enzymes, which are the life force, essentially. Just to bring this home, it takes about 12 metabolic enzymes to create one digestive enzyme. Okay, think about that for a second. If we're eating the most junkety junk food ever, has no enzymes, in fact, it's putting so much stress on our immune system that it's depleting us of enzymes, our body has to constantly digest, right? The human body is amazing, but eventually there is going to be that day when you've sapped up all your metabolic or life enzymes, and if you're not repopulating it, that's going to be your day, right? Someone eats fried chicken every single day. They're going to have that day where it's the last straw that broke the camel's back, right? And that's what we're seeing in our world now. Protein. This is the funniest thing ever. All the years of research on protein, and we still get asked the question, where do you get your protein? It's so, I don't even know, I literally don't even know how to respond to that question, because it's, I don't know where to go with it. I start to laugh sometimes. I'm like, oh, okay, no, stop. Because protein, basically all protein really is, there's protein in pretty much everything if you look at it from a biochemical standpoint. Pretty much all protein is made out of is a strung together set of amino acids. So it's not really protein. Protein is just kind of a word we made up. It's really the amino acids that we're looking for. And there's about, I don't know, they say about 21, 22 complete amino acids. There's probably, we're going to find out in 10 years, there's a whole bunch more stuff. But there's said to be about 8 essential amino acids that we need to derive from food. Now, the really important thing to understand about protein and all that, you know, you need to eat your meat or your dairy for your protein, I found this to be really funny when I started finding research from the Max Planck Institute that actually they did an experiment where they cooked a piece of steak and immediately they found out 50% of that protein was deemed, it was degraded and unusable immediately upon heating it. And the reason for that is because a lot of those essential amino acids are heat volatile, meaning they degrade under high temperatures. Like one I'm thinking of right now, tryptophan. Has anyone heard of tryptophan? Oh my God, this is so critical. Tryptophan, it's like that, you know, when you eat turkey, right? We always told that old story. When you eat turkey,
Or warm milk.
Or warm milk, right? It has tryptophan, so that's what makes you go to sleep. I guarantee, after Thanksgiving, it ain't the tryptophan that's making people go to sleep. Okay? I digress from that.
So what is it?
Well, what do you do when you eat Thanksgiving? The whole thing is, okay, Thanksgiving, we're going to load ourselves up with all kinds of meat and dairy and yams and potatoes and everything. My Thanksgiving, by the way, I had a durian. That was my turkey. And that was the best Thanksgiving ever by far. Okay, so back to this tryptophan thing. Tryptophan is the amino acid which goes through a conversion process into, it creates serotonin. Now everyone knows about serotonin, right? Serotonin is the stress defense shield that is stimulated in our brain. So when we have stress in our life, if we have a lot of serotonin, it's very easy to counterbalance that stress. But if we don't have serotonin, it's very hard to deal with the stresses of living in a concrete society that we do. So when you heat tryptophan, you're killing that ability to create serotonin. Same thing with another amino acid, tyrosine or phenylalanine, that converts into tyrosine, that converts into dopamine. What's dopamine? That's like the pleasure neurotransmitter in our brain. It creates pleasure. It makes us feel good, right? If we're destroying the protein or the amino acids through cooking, we're essentially destroying our ability to create these brain chemicals that make us feel good and help us deal with the stress of our world. Now, maybe it's just me, but I'm seeing a lot of stressed out people in the world. Like when I'm driving in the car and I look to the side and I'm like, ooh, they need some raw food. Because, like, you know, road rage and all that whole like consciousness, what is that coming from? That to me is a cooked food consciousness. That's just the way I see it. Okay, anyways. Moving on, the immune system. This is a fun area of research. In the 1930s, a doctor named Dr. Paul Kuchkov did a study on the effects that consuming an overabundance of cooked food had on our immune system. And what he found out was, if you have at least 50 or 51%, whatever the number really is, of cooked food in relation to, or if you have more cooked food than you do raw food, or no raw food, which is the case for most people, you have something that is called a digestive leukocytosis, which is basically a white blood cell reaction in the body that senses a foreign invader coming in and goes off to subdue that invasion, which is basically what happens when we ingest cooked food, or mostly meat products. As we're finding out more and more with the research, it's really geared towards when we ingest cooked meat, right? And don't get me started on this whole raw meat thing that's trying to rise to surface. That's not like an alternative option, you know. People are like, oh, well, you know, I just eat raw meat. No, that's not what I'm talking about. There's a reason why we cook meat, okay? Anyway, so what he found out was, this is really interesting, was that when someone has 51% raw food or more in relation to their cooked food, they don't have such a digestive stress on their immune system. It starts to dampen that. So what's the moral of that? If you have more cooked food in your diet than you do, if you have more raw food in your diet than you do cooked food, it's going to subdue the effects that too much cooked food has on our immune system. And this is not to say, you know, you can't have any cooked food, you can't have what you want. It's just, this is based on the research that came out. And I find it super interesting because as we move into the future, it's going to be all about the immune system. Everything is showing, I mean, every single kind of stress that we have, from electromagnetic stress to food stress to, you know, factory farming stress to relationship stress and everything in between, it's all affecting our immune system. It's all about our immune system. So as we move out into the future, we need to get really clear on how we feel and what we're putting into our body, what we're putting into our mind, and what we're putting into our heart. It's all very related. Okay, and then also on metabolism. I talk to a lot of people that have trouble like losing weight, or you know, they get to that last point where there's like there's last like 30, 40 pounds or whatever it is, depending on the person, and they just can't quite get it. And like my friend Carol, like, she's been doing different things. And I applaud you, because maybe doing 100% raw maybe wasn't the right thing, so you've branched out to look into other avenues, right?
Well, I'm still exploring.
And we're still exploring,
I'm
right?
still trying to figure out what my own personal nutritional blueprint is.
Absolutely, and that's the point that I want to drive, is that we all have a unique biochemical individuality, meaning that no one thing is going to work for every single person here, because we're all in different stages of our life. We're all built differently. It's just the way it is, right? So our metabolism, the point that I want to drive here is really interesting. There's something called the allostatic taste change. Has anyone ever heard this term? Basically, this is what happens when you eat too much like raw food. See, this is very important. When we eat like raw food and natural food, the body sends out a signal like, okay, dude, it's enough. You've had too many nuts. Like the taste starts changing. Like, okay, you've had too much pineapple. It's cool. Too much bananas. It's good. The taste starts to change into like from a sweet to a bitter. That's how our body knows. Okay, I've had enough. On cooked food, they found out there is no such taste change that occurs. So what do we end up doing? We keep eating, feeding ourselves or satiating ourselves, but there's no taste change. So our metabolism gets thrown totally out of whack. Right? And if you've been doing this for like 20 years, say you've like been bombarding yourself for 20 years with negative thoughts and detrimental food and everything else, it's going to take you some time to get back to where you want to be. It took you this long to get to this place. You can't fool yourself and be like, okay, I cleansed for a day. I'm good. I'm going to go back. It took you a long enough time to get to this point. It's going to take you a little bit of time to get to where you want to go, right? That's a personal development principle that I was put on years ago, which, you know, makes a lot of sense. But that's an interesting fact about the metabolism and understanding our metabolism. And the last part on this is dehydration. I mean, if I could like pinpoint one thing that everybody needs to really pay attention to is how hydrated are you? Like, are you drinking enough quality water? I'm not talking about tap water, because that has nothing to do with water. Right? Water is, I mean, you know, I could go off on a huge tangent on water, which I'm not going to do. But basically, we want to be getting the highest quality water. Now, the really awesome thing about raw plants, and especially raw plants, vegetables, especially fruits, like really well-grown fruit, is that it has electrolytical conductivity within it through the water. Right? And that's what, you know, you eat like a fresh peach. I can't wait till like peaches and pears and plums come back in the summer. That's going to be a joy. When you bite into that, you're literally hydrating yourself with real energy, right? And that's a big thing on the raw food. The raw food path is that you start to not need like 8 to 10 glasses of water, right? Growing up in nutrition classes, I was taught, oh yeah, you need like 8, 9, 10 glasses of water. Especially if you're an athlete, you need like 2 things of Gatorade, you know, to meet your limit. Assuming, you know, Gatorade has anything to do with anything. And that's what we were sold, right? But when you get into live foods, raw foods, vegetables and fruits, it's like, you're like, whoa, in spring water especially, once I got onto spring water and did nothing but spring water for like 6 months, I'm a hardcore athlete. I still play basketball at a high level, like I did when I was trained to play professionally. And I'm having breakthroughs. This is how I can talk about this with like conviction, is that like, I just trained the high school basketball team last night in drills, and they're all like winded. I'm like, dude, what's wrong with you guys? You guys are like athletes, right? Come on, let's go. And I mean, it's really amazing what starts to happen to your physiology after you do this for a while. The hydration is the big thing. Now, to drive this point home, as I was digging through Dr. Gabriel Cousins' research, I came across this really interesting study that was done in the 50s by this doctor named Dr. George Watson. And what his research was all about was finding someone's metabolic balance and correcting psychological behavior, right? So there's like a statistic. David Wolf told me there's some statistic like 1 in 4 people is psychologically like out of balance in our world, right? And you see that in the raw food world. You see it in the carnivore world, the Paleolithic world, the everything goes world. You see it in every single world. Like 1 in 4 people is neurologically out of balance. And that has a lot to do with acidity and alkalinity. What Dr. Watson's research was all about was finding the balance. And he found out when someone goes too far into an acidic lifestyle, they start to develop neurological issues. They start to get out of balance. But once he started getting those people back in their appropriate alkaline balance, they started to correct themselves. They could think clearly. They got back in balance. They could actually talk to people. I mean, it was amazing. And the next thing I'm going to bring up is really correlated with that research. I want everyone to look at this real quick, if you can. Can you guys see this picture?
Yes.
What is that?
It's a brain.
It's a brain, right? Is that the most accurate, like, description of our brain ever? Can you guys see that? This is the right and left hemisphere of our brain. Okay, one side looks pretty damn happy. The other side looks pretty damn bored. Can you guys see that up there? Okay, cool.
Pretty harsh value judgment.
Well, right, and that, yeah.
Some people get off on analytical stuff.
Oh, true, and I'm one of those people too, and I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. This is just a picture to drive this point. Is that one of the things that really got me into deeply researching neurological health? I'm really into the brain right now and researching how it's affected by nutrition. And it's amazing, the research I'm coming up with. There was a guy, he's still around, he's still promoting this message. His name's Tony Wright. Has anyone ever heard of Dr. Tony Wright in the UK? Yes. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So this guy literally broke the world record in staying up 12 days in a row. This guy's a live foodist, he's really into fruit, and his whole work is on the right and left hemisphere of the brain. And he put out a book called Left in the Dark. Okay? Where's most people at right now? If you had to decide, like, the right brain is like creativity, imagination, passion, inspiration, love, joy, all that. And then the left side is more like, is very analytical. It's like taxes, emails, abacus. It's like thinking, linear, right? Like I said, not saying we need to capitalize on both. But if you had to take one guess, where is most people focused on? Is it right or left?
Right, left. Right.
Is it? You think most people are really in their like authentic, passionate self?
Then no, left.
That right. Most people, for the most part, from what I can that I can see, and also from my own experience, are really stuck in the left side, which is like it's got to be logical. It's got to make sense. I got to be able to do. I got to show my work. You know, there's some problems and equations that I put together. Sorry, teacher, I can't show my work. Right? Because I don't know how I got to that conclusion, but somehow it was gifted to me. That's more the right side of the brain. That's like the creativity, right? So his work is shown. What he came to find out was when someone gets off a natural diet, which is what we're talking about, which is more live foods, they start to fall into the left side of their brain. And that's what we're seeing in our society. But once you start getting into live foods and you start alkalizing your body, you start to flip into what I would say is probably your more authentic self, which is a little more love in your life, a little more inspiration, a little more happiness, a little letting go, a little less attachment, right? That's been my experience. I don't know if anyone else here can relate to that. But the thing about live foods is that when you start getting into this lifestyle, it starts opening you up, right? Because we basically have encapsulated our heart in this concrete surrounding, and what raw foods does is it gets in there and starts breaking down those walls, and it's like, no, there is more. Go play, go experience life. It's like what Dan was saying over there. It's like you start just doing what you love to do, right? Like when I was working at the hospital in the emergency room, I hated that. I hated that. And I would bring like 3 pounds of spaghetti with me every single day. Or 1 pound, whatever the hell I was doing for 10 hours. Right? Just to deal with it. That was my distraction. Right? But once I got into live foods, I was like, no, I don't want to do that, and I quit. And everyone was like, huh? What? What are you doing? I was like, listen, I don't even know, but I can't be here with you guys anymore. I gotta go. And then I just did that, and I started getting into what I love to do, which is this kind of work. So the last thing I'll touch on, and I'm just going to do it real quickly, give you a last little thing to think about. When we're talking about why do we cook our food? Okay, we've talked about the health. We talked about like what kind of effect it has neurologically. Now, what kind of effect does cooking food have on the environment? Has anyone thought about that? I mean, so many people here are like, okay, factory farming, worst thing ever, right? I think we can all agree that is probably like the biggest separation from where we're trying to go. But it's not just that. It's also just the fact that we cook our food at such a hyper speed. It has such an effect on our environment. There's a statistic like 42% of the soot that has been put over Southeast Asia is directly from cooking fires, from restaurants. Right? That's a pretty big statistic. And I got that statistic like 5 years ago. I mean, you can just imagine how it might have increased since then. Because 90% of the world, believe it or not, they're not doing what we're doing on electric stoves. They're cooking their food with
fire.
With fire, right? And what are they cutting down to get that fire?
Wood.
Wood. What do we need more than anything right now on our planet?
Trees.
Yes. Trees. Where does all life come from? Where does it start? It starts from the... Yeah, well, okay. Thank you. True. It starts from the sun and then goes into the soil. And from the soil births everything we need to create all life on this incredible planet that we live on. So I started looking at that, I'm like, whoa. Like cooking food really has a bigger impact than I once thought. And like I said, it's not to say that you can't ever cook your food, it's just to kind of throw that out there, drop it in your conscious reservoir, and let it marinate a little bit, and then, you know, see what that grows into. There's a quote that, before I progress off, there's a quote that I wanted to read. Does everyone know who Viktoras Kulsvinskis is? He's like one of the godfathers of raw food, right? Yeah. Him and Ann Wigmore back in like the I don't know, the 50s or 60s, they were riding around their bus all across the country, you know, proliferating about sprout juice. Right, healing people with sprouts and sprout juice. What amazing work they did. And thank God for their work, for paving the way. Otherwise, you know, probably none of us would know anything about this without the pioneers that came before us. So thank God for them and the power that they put out there. There's a quote from David Wolf's The Sun Food Diet Success System, which is my personal favorite book. I've read that probably 3 times. Rereading it again, I always get something new out of it. But there was a quote that he has. The cooking of food is by far the biggest waste of resources on planet Earth. Viktoras Kulsvinskis, in his classic book, Survival into the 21st Century, reports that cooking destroys 85% of the food value in any food that we're talking about. Now, this whole conversation has been based on food, but just consider this. What went into that food? What kind of energy? What kind of effort, what kind of time, all the labor, all the resources that went into preparing that food, and now 85% of that food is gone? I mean, that's a pretty big like thing to think about. That's why I'm so inspired about raw plant food, because it's getting back to nature, it's getting back to what's normal and natural, and it's saving a lot of people's lives. I mean, what do you think raw foods means today? Right?
Yeah, saved my life.
Saved your life.
Yeah.
What do you think it means to Dan? I've been watching you for years on YouTube, dude. From that moment,
saves my life every day, man.
Every day, right? Because we're given a new life every day. That's the way I feel. I mean, there's so many amazing people in this room right now. Even if you don't realize it, what's really cool about raw foods is that it reconnects you with your inspiration and with your heart. And when you're able to connect with your heart, you can connect with other people's hearts. Because when you encapsulate and you block it off with concrete society and everything they try to get us to do to get us out of our heart, you can't connect with another person's heart. It's business as usual every single day in that world. But now it's like I can connect with someone in a real way because I see the magnificence in myself, and that allows me to see it in other people. And that's really the beautiful thing about this lifestyle. So I'm going to bring it to a close now. I really appreciate everybody taking the time to you know, just be quiet and just pay attention to me. I feel such a privilege to even have your attention, to be able to put this message out there. It means everything to me to do this work. And yeah, that's about it.
Right on.
Yeah,
Man.
thank you.
YouTubers. They want to know where to find you.
Oh, what's going on, everyone on YouTube land?
Let me jump in because
please.
No, well, I want you to make sure that everybody can find, because that was a really good talk. Some really strong, solid research information, and I don't know if I missed the beginning, so I want to make sure you have a chance to let everybody know. Dan the Man approved right here for sure. Good talk, everybody, right? Yeah. So where can we find you, bro?
I have a website right now, RonnieLandis.com, and that's mostly just kind of like a blog site. But actually, what's cool about that is I have a book coming out in the next few months called The Live It Lifestyle: Dropping Diets Forever. So that's a book that I have that I've been working on the last year and a half, and I have some excerpts on that on my webpage, RonnieLandis.com, from that book. And then on YouTube, type in my name, Ronnie Landis. A bunch of videos will come up.
And that's Landis.
YouTube?
Yeah.
Ronnie Landis. How do you spell it?
It's actually the YouTube name is Ron Lee TKD. So RonLee TKD.
Okay. Why don't you say that one more time?
Okay. So
YouTube.
Ron Lee TKD. RonLee TKD. Or just type in RonnieLandis.com. You'll find like basketball videos, martial arts videos, and then some stuff from talks and whatnot.
I'll try to put a link down below underneath. I'll try to find your channel. That's why I asked you twice, so that I don't have to rewind. And that was really good, man. So I would love to take that energy and feed myself, and then feed my viewers as well. If that's okay.
Let's do that.
Cool, and I love, because I love the live talks too, you're feeding off the energy, and most of mine are just monologue rants of my incredible genius. I'm kidding. But when you get a live audience, you get to feed off that a little bit more, and I want to do something I always forget to do, and that is to ask questions and answers. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that your video, and then I'm going to restart another one.
Right on.
That makes it easier for me to upload, whatnot. So y'all take care. We love you. Great 50-minute video. They're going to love that, bro.
Thank you.